And we're live. Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar. My name is Samantha, Head of Client Services at PayProp, and I'm thrilled to be your host today. Before we dive in, allow me to introduce our guest speakers who've generously agreed to share their expertise with us today. First, please welcome Christine, PayProp's very own sales manager. We have Mariam from Cash Management at CIBC, and Bryan, owner of OrangeList Property Management. Thank you for being here, and we're truly lucky to have you. Here's what we have planned for the next 40-ish minutes. We'll start with Christine and take a look at how landlords benefit from the cutting-edge payment platform. We'll hear from Mariam about fraud awareness and treasury best practices, followed by Bryan, who will talk to us about how the Landlord Tenant Board has affected rental housing. Please feel free to ask your questions in the chat. We'll answer your questions as we go along. You can ask our experts anything. So grab your coffee and your notebook and get comfortable, and let's get started. Christine, over to you.
Hello. Good. I was going to say good afternoon. It's not quite afternoon, and no, you can't ask us anything. So keep it topic appropriate, please. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm thrilled to be here with you today, and I'm so happy to see you all here. We have your mics muted, but as Sam said, for the presentation, if you have any chats, any questions you want to ask, please feel free to throw them in the chat. Just if you want to introduce yourself, say who you are, anything, what you're going to have for lunch, it's all good. So again, don't be shy, throw them in there, and we'll try to answer them. If we don't answer them live, we will always send you an email afterwards, and we can get those answered for you at some point. So again, my name is Christine Hartinger. I am the sales manager for PayProp Canada, and we have invited you here today to provide you with some really key information. So if you are not already using property management software, you should be. And before we get to our guest speakers today, I wanted to give you some insight into PayProp and tell you how we can help you, like we've helped thousands of property managers win new business and command higher management fees, providing premium product to your client. So really, PayProp is a cutting-edge payment platform. It's designed for property managers, and it ensures faster payments, professional fund management, and unmatched visibility for owners. So landlords love PayProp because it allows them to get paid faster. And that is an exact quote from one of our clients, Amina Davidson from East Vista Management. And that's really, really the powerful tool that we're trying to help you with right now. As we know, property management is many things, but the key for any owner is or client is knowing that their money is accounted for. Very important. So you want a software that offers rental payment options, such as bill payments or pre-authorized debits. These options get owners paid faster. What if you could tell a prospective client that they have the money in their bank account the same day that the rent is paid? Very powerful sales tool. Transparency. When handling other people's money, you want to make sure that your business is as transparent as possible. What better way than offering automated bank integration, ensuring accurate transaction reporting? So live balance tracking across rent deposits, landlord wallets, and repairs. What about a software wherein all actions are date stamped and logged for accountability? You want world-class tools. So really, you want a software that provides 100% accurate reports because they are pulled directly from the bank and they are sent to your clients monthly automatically. You do not need to think about it. You don't need to add a calendar reminder. It's done for you. It's all about automation. What if you could provide fully itemized statements showing rent payments, contractor payments, property management fees? Ideal for tax season for your owners, obviously something that's very important to them. Maintenance ticketing, ticket tracking, with live notifications and tenant communication directly through the software, a software that tenants can report maintenance issues directly through their own tenant portal, wherein all communications with that tenant are logged and wherein you can pay contractors directly. So PayProp does all of that for you. Keeping on top of rent payments. As we all know, rent payments is one of the biggest pain points for our property managers and owners. And PayProp helps you keep on top of that. So you need a software that automates invoices and reminders. So we found that these actions, the automation, the reminders that are within the system increase the likelihood of tenants paying rent on time by 80%. And that's, again, pretty powerful. So, what if you could have real-time alerts for tenant arrears and be able to react quickly on flagged transactions? You want to be the first one to get paid. And these tools will help you make that happen. So PayProp, it has the best of both worlds, so to speak, global best practices with local knowledge. So PayProp operates internationally. So we're in many countries. We have been in business since 2004 and have automated millions of rental payment transactions, combining banking, accounting, communications, and property management. Now pair this with our Canadian team, myself, Sam, and the rest of us who are not on the call right now. And we have a winning combination. So with PayProp, you will receive local support from our award-winning customer service team. They are local platform experts that provide world-class service. So in closing, I just wanted to say, PayProp has empowered thousands of rental agencies worldwide with efficient, accurate, and secure property management solutions. We work alongside you to help you grow your business. And I would love to take some time to explore what PayProp has to offer further. You can visit payprop.ca or reach out to me directly to book a personalized demo. My contact info is on the invitation. So please reach out and we can chat more. And I would be more than happy to run through the software with you and personalize it to your business. So thank you so much for listening, and on to our friends at CIBC.
Thanks, Christine. Property managers are actually asset managers looking after landlords' biggest assets. So it makes sense that they have the correct tools to manage those properties and, owners having access to those reports that help them make those important investment decisions. Thank you. Mariam, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Samantha. Thank you, Christine. Yes, so thank you for having me today. My name is Mariam Nihad. I work at CIBC in commercial banking and treasury. We are here today just to talk about some fraud awarenesses in treasury best practices that we have seen a lot of our clients use and, would like to be aware of if you are managing, a company, your employees, vendors, and suppliers. We have a bit of an agenda to go through. But again, if you have any questions or anything, please put them in the chat, like Christine has mentioned and Samantha, or if we can get to your question, we can always just answer them later on. Perfect. Okay. Samantha, if you just want to go to the next slide. Perfect. Awesome. So we're going to go over 3 types of fraud awarenesses that we have at CIBC in every bank that you currently are banking with, financial institution. We're going to talk about fraud and cybersecurity awareness. We're going to go over any anti-fraud and treasury best practice, and then any recourse rules that you might have for your electronic payments and any of your check payments as well. Perfect. So going over to fraud and cybersecurity. So types of fraud. So this is a slide just to let you know what fraud is, how it's managed, what are the stats. This is not meant to scare you. This is meant to make you aware and look out for things that, it might happen to you as well. So what is fraud? So fraud can be committed by employees. Fraud can be committed by your customers, so including their employees or any external parties, so like your suppliers or any crime organizations. In 2025, there has been over 33,854 reports of fraud that has been submitted. And this stats is all coming from Canadian Anti-Fraud Center. As you can see, in 2024, there has been over 52,000 cases. So we are trying to make our clients aware and give them resources so they can look out for what fraud is, and also to, make them stay away from that. So types of fraud, what can we see for fraud? So if you look at the right-hand side, there is many types of fraud that we have seen, and especially now in the day and age with electronics and phones. So there is text and email fraud, which we all seen. You get an email saying, hey, this is CRA, you have to pay your bill, right? So all we have to do is delete it and ignore it. Other types of fraud that you've seen is debit and credit card fraud. Another would be identity fraud and check fraud, which we have seen all the time, especially at the banking, like at the bank. We've seen a lot of clients that write checks and all of that. So there has been a lot of check frauds. And then other common frauds, so like SIM jacking or ransomware. We're going to talk all about these types of fraud and how you can be on the lookout for in the next couple of slides. Perfect. So now we're going to go through the types of fraud in more details. So the first one is business email compromise, which everyone has probably heard business email compromise in, some sort of ways, or has heard them in, your company or your committee or anything that you have been on. So there is 3 types of business email compromise. One, it's a supplier. So supplier is, you're going to request, if here comes from a supplier saying, hey, Samantha, I've updated my banking information. Can you please send the invoice to this email address, or to send it to this account? That is fraud, right? If you know the client, you know their bank account, this has been the bank account that you have been paying them for the last 5-10 years, and then they change it, that's a bit fraud, right? So that's when you pick up the phone, call your contact there, and just to verbally confirm everything and make sure that it is legitimate, or else when you're sending the money or the check, then it goes to the fraudster's account. Another types of fraud is CEO fraud. So that's when the request appears to come from a CEO or like a CFO of the company. And then it's just saying that, it's a secret payment. So usually what the fraudsters do is they hack into the CEOs or the CFO's email address, and then they work around their schedule and they work around their calendars. So let's say if the CEO or if somebody is out on a business trip, or if they're not there, they will utilize that and say, hey, let's say I'm in the airport and I can't access my card. Can you please send me money to this email address? And then that's how the email compromises happens. And then that's how the fraudsters get a hold of your bank account, the payment, and all the information that you would provide them. Another types of business email compromise would be payroll. So your employees emailing you or giving you a call or anything like that saying, hey, we've updated our banking information, right? So all of those things that happen through an email, the fraudster has their email access from the other side. So even if like somebody is hacking myself or anybody else, I won't be able to see it because they delete the email right away. So there's no evidence of the email even being existing, but you would see it because you're going to be updating all of that information. So that's the best practice would be just picking up the phone, calling a reliable source that you know, or just confirming everything with that specific person. Perfect. Client email compromise. So things to be aware of for client email compromise is you have to look at the email address. There has been so many email addresses that are fraudulent that make some little tweaks and changes from the email address that it looks legitimate. So you have to look for your I's, you have to look for your L's. Sometimes a B can look like a 3, or they will change a B to a 3. So it will look like, from a first glance, it looks legitimate, but you actually have to just make sure that, it is coming from the right person, the right email address, especially now with Outlook has been, there has been an update saying like, you've never contacted this person before, or this is from an external source. So all of these things to look out for would be a best practice, and always just verifying the payments or the purchase or anything with a reliable source that you know. Perfect. So we're just going to move over to check fraud. So there is a lot of check frauds, as we know. A lot of our clients has been a victim of check fraud at one point in time, and we just try to make our clients aware of, how to look out for check frauds. So usually the best practice is, if you can get away from checks and do more electronic payments, that would be more safer for you and the person that you are paying. So your vendors, your suppliers, your customers. It is the best way of doing payments. It is direct deposited into the bank accounts as well. So, and it saves you time and the stampage fees and, from the Canada Post strike. So all of that, it's, comes together, then it would be better just to do everything more electronically. But if we look, there is 3 types of check frauds. The first one is altered checks. So altered checks is the payee name and the amount can be changed by the fraudster. So let's say if you're mailing out a check, and especially if it's in a window envelope, the fraudsters will intercept, take the check, change the amount and change the name, and then they'll be able to deposit it into their bank account. That's when your vendor or supplier calls you and say, hey, I haven't received my check. What's going on? And then that's where the altered check fraud happens. Another types of fraud is counterfeit checks. So that's copies of the original checks are made and deposited multiple times, but the change of a check number or the amount. So that's when the fraudster gets a hold of the check. They'll just scratch off the name that is payable to. They'll initial it, put their name, and then change the check number. So that's why they'll be able to deposit that check multiple times at a different institution and just keep changing those numbers, and then you'll never be aware of it. Another types of check fraud is forged endorsements. So that's when they'll modify the signature of the owner, CEO, CFO, bookkeeper that has the check signed, and then they'll just keep reusing that signature into different checks. So ways to protect yourself, it's like I mentioned before, reducing your use of checks in favors of electronic payments. Choose the right envelopes when you're sending the checks. So don't use a window envelope, use more of an enclosed envelope. Secure stored checks. So if you're not using checks, make sure that they're stored properly and locked away. If you destroy any unused checks, so if you have an account that's closed, if you have any checks for that, just make sure that you've destroyed everything and shredded all of the bank statements, all the bank accounts, all of the checks, in order for nobody gets a hold of them and they'll be able to write any checks. And then just make sure when you're issuing a check, use serial numbers and everything that you are aware of. And also, depending on the platform that you have with your current financial institution, you can log into your online banking and look at all the checks that has been deposited and make sure that it is payable to the right person, the right amount, the right check number. So you can always do your account reconciliation that way as well. Perfect. So phishing. So phishing is when a fraudster reaches out via email, via text, or via call, and they try to impersonate somebody else. Usually, we have been getting a lot of activities and a lot of fraud, calling you saying, hey, this is the CRA, or saying, hey, this is a business agency. So pretending to be your vendors and suppliers, and usually saying, hey, this is the government. So types of that is, again, you can protect yourself by not giving them information, making sure that it is a reliable source that is calling. And then the best practices and the best thing is saying, I'll hang up now, and then I'll call somebody that I know from that company, just to make sure that everything is legitimate. Perfect. So moving over to anti-fraud best practices. We're just going to be talking about some fraud preventions and additional perseverance and measures and best practices that can help you. So as mentioned, each type of fraud has its own countermeasures. We have summarized all of them in this page, but I would like to just highlight some of the things that are more effective and that you should always look out for. So the first thing is think before you click. So if you get an email with an attachment or a URL or a website, just think before you click. Make sure that it is reliable, it is trusted, and it's coming from somebody that you know. Another thing is verbally confirm. So that is the biggest thing, is just make sure that you're always verbally confirming the information that you're receiving via email from your clients and from your suppliers, and make sure that everything is per code or as stated in that email. Another thing would be establish role-based access controls and implement systems login, like dual multi-authenticator or dual approvals on payments. So depending on the financial institution you're with, you're usually able to do a payment. So any electronic payments, any outgoing payments here at CIBC requires 2 people to approve. So one person creates the payment, if it's an electronic payment, a wire, a bill payments, and then another person will have to approve that payment as a sign off. That way, even let's say if it's a fraud, let's say I log in, create the payment, but it's fraud, at least my counterpart or the person that is trying to approve the payment can double check the work and make sure that everything is legitimate, or that other person can catch it saying, hey, we're making a payment to PayProp, but their account number is different. So what's going on? So it always gives another set of eyes to make sure that everything is legitimate. Another thing that we would talk is timely bank account reconciliation. So depending on when you do your account reconciliation, if it's daily, weekly, monthly, just always make sure that everything is up to par and you are checking everything that you are aware that's happening. And if there's anything that's suspicious or you're not aware of, just always engage your bank so they can give you more information about that. And then another thing is just safeguards on checks and eliminating window envelopes for when you have to mail that check. Just make sure that you are not using a window envelope and you are sending it through a trusted source. Perfect. So some recourse rules that we have. We're going to go over some for checks and then some for electronic payments, because there has been some fraud when it comes to EFTs too, when you're getting, unupdated bank account information or anything like that from the fraudsters. So when it comes to recourse rules for fraudulent checks, so these are the guidelines that we have from Payment Canada that all of the banks and businesses need to abide by when it comes to check frauds. So if it's a counterfeit checks, it's 1 business day. So if you are aware that, and then when you're doing your account reconciliation or anything, if you see that there is a counterfeit check fraud, just let your financial institution know. We have 1 day to try and stop it and then regain those funds. When it comes to ultra checks, again, we have 1 day, but we can go up to 90 days. We have that 90-day window where we can recollect the payments and try to salvage it. And same thing for forged checks. So forged checks is, we can go up to 6 years. So let's say if a check has been deposited 2-3 years from now and you are aware that it is fraud, from Payments Canada said we can go up to 6 years, but you would have to sign a declaration form stating that it is fraud and everything is legitimate that you're providing to the bank. Perfect. Some recourse rules when it comes to electronic funds transfers. So let's say if a fraudster reach out to you with an updated payment information, or whenever your employees has given you an updated account number for their payroll and it does go through, we can recall a EFT payment with 1 business day. So we can try to retrieve it before it gets deposited into the fraudster's bank account. When it comes to EFT returns, that's a bit, we have up to 90 days because that financial institution that you're sending the funds to can intercept the payment and say, well, we're not returning it until the 90-day window is passed. Then we can try to salvage the funds. So those are the 2 types of EFT frauds that could happen, and then the recalls with the timeline. Recalls are 1 day. So let's say if you approve the payments and you're not sure, let's say like you did it by accident, or you're sure it went to the wrong bank account, then we can always try to, credit it back into your account with 1 business day. But when it comes to returns, and if it's past that 1 or 2 days, then it would take up to 90 days to do. Perfect. So that is everything for me. I'll pass it back to Samantha. And if there's any questions or anything that you would like to know about, you can always just reach out to Samantha, and then my information is also on there as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariam. Fraud and identity theft has really become really scary. I strongly encourage everybody to go and look for content and educate themselves on how to, spot those emails that aren't really from the bank, etc. And read the emails from the actual bank. They're always giving tips on how to protect yourself. So be careful out there. Right, Bryan, the floor is all yours. You need to unmute yourself.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Well, my name is Bryan Droppert. I'm one of the co-founders at OrangeList Property Management in St. Catharines, Ontario, and I thought it would be interesting to talk a little bit about the effects that the Landlord and Tenant Board of Ontario has had on the rental availability in the market in Ontario since its inception in 1998. So if you hop over to slide 2, I already said that already, so that's cool. So we'll go to slide 3. So there you go. Before the Landlord and Tenant Board of Ontario existed, Ontario built roughly 9,500 purpose-built rental units every single year. However, after the Landlord and Tenant Board took over in 1998, that number drastically collapsed by more than 85% and has never actually recovered. At the same time, the population of Ontario has grown by over 5 million people. The result of that is chronic housing shortages and skyrocketing rent rates. Now, how does that affect directly in the Niagara region? Obviously, those numbers are all of Ontario. This is Niagara specifically. Purpose-built rental completions in St. Catharines from 1990 to 1997, which is pre-Landlord and Tenant Board of Ontario, was 1,200 units per year. You look at the most recent numbers, 2020 to 24, only 150 units per year. But look at 1998, immediately after the inception of the Landlord Tenant Board of Ontario, it was only 200 units per year, like a massive drop off. So we'll hop over to slide 4. And by the way, I'm only bringing this subject up because it's been a subject lately in the news. It's a new political subject. People are talking about more rent control laws, ways the government wants to get more involved. And quite frankly, I think the government is largely the source of the issue. And it's not all the government policies, but there are certain things we can pinpoint through this presentation, I think, that will illustrate how they could make some modifications to improve the issue without throwing the whole baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, right? So the Landlord Tenant Board process is actually extremely, extremely slow. It's heavily weighted towards keeping tenants in place, even when they haven't paid rent for a year or more. A landlord who files an L1 eviction, which is for non-payment of rent, can wait 8 to 14 months in Ontario, and then another 3 to 6 months for the sheriff to actually come out and enforce that eviction. That's 12 to 20 months of lost income with zero recourse. There is literally no other commercial contract in Canada that tolerates this kind of unilateral breach. One-sided breach of contract is what I'm saying. It takes forever. Now, specifically as you can see across Ontario, the landlord bears 100% of non-payment risk. Specifically in Niagara, it's not quite as bad, but it's still really bad. The tenant can stop paying rent and stay for 6 to 12 months before they're actually evicted. And the average time in Niagara is non-payment of rent. By the time they get evicted, it's 4 to 6 months. So, and it's actually gotten longer in the last year since 2024. And the provincial backlog for unresolved cases is 78,000. That's up 20% year over year. So if you're wondering why there's a housing shortage, it's not because we need more government rules. We need more people to get into the market and provide more housing. And why is that not happening? It's because of the rules that are getting in the way. So we'll hop over to the next slide real quick. For a small or medium-sized landlord, one non-paying tenant can bankrupt that landlord. Institutional investors and condo buyers look at these numbers and simply decide, we're not going to expose our capital that we control, to Ontario's rental market. The math is really brutal, and it's just way too risky. And sadly, as I said a minute ago, there's politicians advocating for more controls to make it even more risky for them. Here's a little example. So in St. Catharines, a $1,400 a month unit. This is a little old data, but because technically speaking, a 2-bedroom unit in St. Catharines would go for a little more than $1,400, but whatever. For the sake of math, a $1,400 a month unit in St. Catharines, it stops paying on January 1st. By the time the sheriff, say 8 months, evicts that person, it's $11,200. The legal and filing fees, in addition to that, are going to be about $1,500. Then you've got damage and cleanup. That's around $4,000 to $7,000. You're looking at a total loss on just one 2-bedroom apartment. Forget about a whole building. Forget about a big house. Just one little 2-bedroom apartment. You're looking at almost $20,000 before tax. That's 1 to 2 years of normal profit wiped out by just one bad tenant. So you're talking about a pretty big risk there. And it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. So we'll go to the next slide. Large sophisticated investors have seen the data, and they have options because they have money. Usually they have more options than a small-time investor who lives and invests locally, right? They're voting with their billions of dollars. Quebec, Alberta, and BC all saw far more big money rental development than Ontario. Money flows where risk-adjusted returns are acceptable because there's always risk. It's just a question of whether or not the amount of risk relative to the return is acceptable. And frankly, Ontario is no longer on that list. Quebec has strict rules, even stricter than Ontario, in the tenant's favor, but they actually move quickly, unlike the Landlord Tenant Board of Ontario. And the result is they get way more investment. Quebec built 5 times more purpose-built rental per capita from 2015 to 2023 in comparison to the province of Ontario. So we'll hop over to the next slide. Strict rent control combined with eviction being a near impossibility has created a lethal mix. Because the professional rental sector has been strangled, the only new rental units being added are individually owned units that get rented out. When interest rates rise or policy risk increases, those units get flipped to owner occupied or get sold. So this little statistic here, 2024, the number of new condominium completions that were built and sold is 1,200. The amount built in that same year for like individuals to just rent was only 150. And the reason why that matters is because back in the day, prior to the Landlord Tenant Board, as I was saying, 1998 and earlier, they were building approximately 1,200 rental units per year. Those typically stay rental units. Hell or high water, market ups and downs, they stay rental units. But when you're buying these little condo units that most of the time they're not actually for rent, they're owner occupied, but the odd one that is a rental, it's very flimsy. The littlest hiccup in the market, the littlest uncertainty, the littlest tenant struggle, they liquidate, they sell. And so you really have a very small amount by comparison of new purpose-built rentals being built compared to those condo apartments, which are not nearly as reliable for rental because they're not all for rental. And when they are, they don't last very long. Slide number 8, landlords cannot raise rents enough to cover exploding costs, and they struggle to regain possession of their units in order to sell or develop. The result is deferred maintenance, demo evictions, that's where people get evicted to do a renovation, and zero incentive to build additional rentals. So if you look at the 2023 to 2025 Landlord and Tenant Board guidelines for rent increases, in 2023, it was 2.5%. For 2024, 2.5%. 2025, 3%. The actual operating costs at that time, the increases in Niagara, for example, property taxes went up 20 to 35%. Insurance went up 60 to 250%. Utilities and maintenance went up 25 to 45%. And many homes that were built in the 1980s and 1990s are operating at a negative cash flow situation. And people are still trying to blame landlords. And there's a stat coming up later in here that 55+% of landlords in Niagara specifically are small landlords, small-time landlords, not big institutionalized investment firms, real estate investment trusts. It's not that. It's small little landlords, and they're getting crushed. When you imagine they're getting zero cash flow, that means there's no money left over for any kind of headaches that might arise, and that's what we're looking at right now. And if you look at the rising costs we've experienced over the last few years, they're huge. And look at the Landlord Tenant Board of Ontario. Yeah, you can raise your rent 2.5%. That's nothing. It's an insult. It's really a joke. We'll go to the next slide. So the irony is cruel. A system that is created to protect tenants has priced an entire generation out of independent housing and transferred wealth from small landlords to a tiny minority of landlords who've learned how to play the Landlord and Tenant Board process. In one sense, it's honestly one of the reasons why OrangeList, our business, exists, is because we know how to navigate the Landlord Tenant Board of Ontario. And navigating that Landlord Tenant Board and the Residential Tenancies Act is one of the main reasons why people decide to hire property managers, because it's essential and the risk otherwise is just too great. And if you look at Alberta here as an example, they have no rent control, plus they have way faster evictions, approximately 2 to 4 months. In 2023 to 2024, those were the numbers. And Alberta saw the highest purpose-built starts in decades, right? It's crazy. So anyway, slide number 11. The human cost that few people talk about. The historic percentage of home ownership for people age 18 to 34 in Niagara was 35% in 1991, and now it's down to only 22%. That means that there's an enormous increase in people that can't afford to purchase homes, and so they're therefore looking to rent homes that would otherwise have typically been purchasing homes. This puts more pressure because there's more demand now in the rental market, right? But we're not seeing an increase in supply of housing. We're actually seeing a reduction in supply. So we're getting a massive increase in demand with more tenants and tons of immigration, but we're not seeing a correlating rise in supply. We're actually seeing a reduction in supply based on the numbers that I showed you. And I'll get into right now, in summary, why I think that is. So until Ontario restores reasonable balance, consequences, and timelines to their laws and processes, no amount of zoning reform, although helpful, will bring back large-scale rental construction. We do not need to weaken tenant rights. We just need a tribunal that moves quickly. Because currently, whether politicians and tenant activists realize it or not, the very rules they put in place to help tenants in Ontario are in fact the very thing that are hurting them the most. The Landlord and Tenant Board of Ontario certainly has its place in protecting tenants from dirty landlords, and we acknowledge that. In fact, the rules are quite clear, and the process isn't necessarily terrible. It is the lethargic, slow walking, either by design or by incompetence, of these processes that make them so painful. At OrangeList, most of our clients are average, ordinary folks who only own 1 or maybe 2 rental properties, with the intention of merely having something of value to pass on to their kids in the future, or to perhaps help them in their retirement. Rarely are they organized investment firms. To clients like ours, these institutionalized processing delays can be catastrophic, and the wait times in this industry aren't like an inconvenient government line at the MTO where you might miss a lunch meeting. These delays cost landlords tens of thousands of dollars and enormous stress on their families. In the current environment, as a property manager, one of the most important things we can do for our clients is to help protect them through our very detailed screening process. There are often many tenants we'd sincerely love to take a chance on renting to, but sadly, we will never be given them that chance. Why? Because it's just way too risky. If evictions for late or non-payment were quick, fair, and efficient, and if landlords could negotiate deals with high-risk tenants by utilizing security deposits as necessary leverage, more tenants would be given a chance, where currently their applications are being quietly denied. Interestingly, other industries make deals with their customers in ways that as a landlord, you're not allowed. It's illegal. You look at banks, for instance, they do it every single day with mortgages. If you're a high-risk borrower, the bank requires a larger deposit, or they charge you a higher interest rate. As a borrower, you are not obligated to accept the terms, but it is at least up to you as a consumer to make that choice. However, in the landlord and tenant world of Ontario, not only can the landlord not request a security deposit, as a tenant, you don't even have the right to waive those protections. It's crazy. You can't even offer it up. So therefore, as a tenant who knows they have poor credit and little employment history, they have no way of making his or her application competitive or appealing in the eyes of a landlord, and it's therefore simply denied. So in conclusion, Here are 3 simple and immediately implementable solutions that we feel would make an enormous difference. 1, significantly speed up the landlord and tenant board processes. 2, hire more eviction sheriffs. Once an eviction order is issued, there's absolutely zero excuse for why we should have to wait another 30 to 60 days to get a sheriff out there. There's literally 1 sheriff in all of Niagara. That's insane. Number 3, allow landlords and tenants to make deals that include the holding of refundable security deposits. Simple. You make these 3 simple modifications to the Residential Tenancies Act and the Landlord Tenant Board of Ontario, and the tenant housing issues in Ontario will almost immediately cease to exist. We don't have to get rid of the whole thing. These are just some little tweaks. It'll make the difference. Thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian. Again, you know, property managers are asset managers, and understanding, you know, the not only qualifying and accepting tenants, but also qualifying and accepting the correct landlords. You touched on that. And we've also got to remember that, you know, placing a tenant goes beyond how they pay their credit cards or not. So thank you for that, Brian. Thanks, everyone. That was lovely. It was fun. We will be sending out a follow-up email, and please, any questions that you didn't get a chance to ask in the webinar, please send them through to us. We'll pass them along to our friends to answer for you if it's urgent. But thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thank you.